There's a story told of a husband critiquing his wife while she was driving, criticizing her, if you will. As she was making turns, he frequently said, "Turn here," or "Turn there," or "Slow down," or "You're too close to this car or to that car. You're gonna hit the curb, you need to pull over, get over a little bit, and watch what you're doing. Why are you driving so fast? You know, why are you tailgating the cars in front of you?" And then as they were near their destination, as this went on for about a half an hour or so, they were going to look at a house, and the husband told the wife, "You should have turned a block ahead." And the wife said, "No, according to the address, I should be turning where we are." And the husband like, "No, you should have turned a block ahead. You made the wrong turn." And so the wife is getting frustrated because she's hearing this for the last half an hour or so. She thought about the address and said, "Well, we right where you said we're supposed to go." And so the husband looked at the address, and as he looked at the address, he realized that she was right. And so what he had to do is he had to tell his wife that, and he had to confess to say that, "My bad, the reason I really was telling you to slow down, to watch the curb, to turn here, and I got that wrong was really because," he said, the depth perception of my glasses are off. And I got an appointment tomorrow to go get that corrected." And so he saw objects that appeared closer than what they were. And so even though his wife was driving correctly, his perception about the width, distance of the objects around him caused him to think that she was making a mistake, and really the mistake was just about his vision. If you would just allow me from that backdrop, I'd just like to talk to you for a few minutes from that subject of theme. The revision, preserving God's vision. The revision, preserving God's vision, keeping God's vision, keeping God's message. Looking a little bit more into depth perception, I found out that depth perception has a lot to do with, for it to be right, is it speaks to three dimensions of a person's sight, being able to see the length, the width, and the depth, or the distance of an object from another object. And so in order for this to be accurate, depth perception requires binocular vision, meaning that it requires two eyes looking at an image from slightly different vantage points, working together in what they call convergence to merge those two images for the brain to see one image correctly. And so what happens a lot of times with our lives is that we are looking at objects with poor depth perception. We don't have binocular vision, meaning two perspectives. We have monocular vision, looking at it from one eye. And generally, when you're looking at it from one perspective, your depth perception is generally off. You're generally looking at things from a wrong vantage point. You don't have the right perception. You're misunderstanding, misreading, and misperceiving the situations, the people, places, and things that are going on around you. And so in the spiritual arena, sometimes that's what happens with us, is that we're only looking at things from our monocular perception from one vantage point, and that's generally the physical, spiritual, the physical, material vantage point. We're looking at things based on what we can see, touch, hear, or smell. We're not looking at it from God's perspective in the spiritual. Tony Evans said it this way: if all you see is what you see, then you don't see all there is to be seen. If all you see is what you see, then you don't see all there is to be seen. And that's what the revision has to do with, because in the spiritual arena, we need to have God, to add God's lens to the situations and circumstances that we find ourselves in. Remember, God's revision is where he adds, moves, removes, or substitutes people, places, and things to help us become what he's called us to be. He adds, moves, removes, or substitutes the nouns of this world so that they get out of the way for the real noun that created the world. That means God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. The revision. Remember, looking back, as here in Habakkuk's book, the prophet, remember he had a burden. As you can see it in verse 1, we looked at his burden primarily was that there was unpunished sin that he was looking at. And it was a burden that he saw in his homeland, in his hometown, in his hood, in his ghetto, basically in his neighborhood, in his suburban context. in his country, out in the country, he was looking around, and what he saw was that there was nothing good on the horizon. And his primary emphasis was, his issue was that he was calling on God in prayer and felt like God wasn't responding. Remember, he says in verse 1, how long? You ever had something going on and you keep questioning prayer, how long? How long am I have to go through this? How long am I going to endure this or endure that? How long do I have to deal with them? How long am I have to be here? Are we there yet? Is it coming yet? Has it arrived yet? This is what Habakkuk is talking to God about, because he's cried out in two different ways. He's talked to God saying, look, I was calling out to you on the general. I just screamed out for help as if he had got chased. You know, as a natural response to an emergency, and you didn't say anything. And then he said in the second cry in verse 2, he says, I cried out to you specifically. I called you by name, and you didn't do anything about it. As a child speaking to his parent, I called you, so there was no way, so I gave you the benefit of the doubt. The first time I called out and figured maybe you didn't hear me. Maybe you didn't know I was talking to you, God. So the second time when I called you specifically, and then I found on both occasions you was derelict to your duties in responding to me. You was neglecting me. You was slumbering and sleeping when I needed you. That's his primary issue. You ever called out on God and felt like that he just wasn't answering? Yeah. He just wasn't responding. Things just weren't changing. You were still facing what you were facing. And so, but I do want to caution you that sometimes prayer don't change the situation, but it will always change you. And sometimes God is responding as you're calling to him. He's responding and changing you rather than changing the situation. Some said that God wants to do things in you before he does things through you. And so sometimes that's what happened. But as we see Habakkuk, that his burden, that oracle was really a burden. There was weight on his back. It was getting too heavy for him. And so he had two complaints. Primarily, as I said, the first one was about the cries. But then next was the idleness. He said God was looking at situations and circumstances and appeared to be totally unconcerned because God was doing nothing about it. He said that there was violence going on in the land. And there was injustice, there was social justice issues where the wealthy were bringing in the poor to the church, which had happened a century prior, as Amos 2 records this. And it was possibly going on still in his time, where they were taking the wine, confiscating the wine for debts from the poor. Even though they might have been legally able to do it, they were still going into the temple, into the synagogue, and praising and celebrating before God about how they confiscated and took things from the poor and basically decapitated their ability to be successful. They were celebrating the ability to take from somebody less than them. You ever had people that felt like they were above you, and because they wasn't doing what you were doing, they were sitting around talking about what you were going through, or I'm not where you at, and making you feel smaller, and then having the nerve to be church people, because sometimes that's what we do. We get in the church and we pray like, oh, well, I'm glad I'm not that person. I'm glad I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that. He said they were going in and putting weight on the poor and celebrating their ability to take wine from the poor and put them in a lesser or a harder position. And so he was irritated about that. But it's that social justice issue where I'm treating the lesser than and putting my foot on his neck and holding him back just because I can. And so he was mad about that. But he was also mad about idolatry, where they weren't worshiping God when they could worship God. They were worshiping Baal, this idol god who was believed or said to have been that thunder was his, the clouds were his entourage and lightning was his weapon. The cloud was his entourage and lightning was his weapon. He was a fertility god. So they were worshiping as if he was the sovereign creator God. And so Habakkuk is looking to God like, man, this is your people. This is not Sean and Shane and all them down the block. This is your people in your house. This is the ones that say that they know you. They're the ones that's doing all of this nonsense. But his second complaint was, because he was like, God, you're not doing nothing about sin. His second complaint was, he was like, look, man, God said, look, I'm doing something more than you know. Now be on alert here, because this is verse 5. He said, God said, look in the nation, look around, I'm doing, and be astounded, because I'm doing a work in your days. I'm doing something with the despair that you're facing right now that you wouldn't believe if somebody told you. This situation and this circumstance that you're facing that you think won't end, that you're tired of dealing with, my hand is in it, and I'm doing something that you wouldn't even perceive or believe or trust if somebody told you. If I told you, because God was the one telling them. So the caution is, the concern for us is what is God doing? What could God be using right now to bring you closer to him when you're unaware of it? What is that thing that's getting on your everlasting nerve that could be an agent of God to bring about his glory, his calling, his purpose in your life. That thing that is the thorn in your flesh. Because that's what he tells him. And so he says, look, man, I'm about to do something about this wickedness. I'm about to do something about the criminals breaking in the houses, about my people that are sinning, slandering people, throwing stones at one another, that you're looking at, you figure like, this is not how it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be like that. He says, what I'm about to do is I'm about to bring this wicked nation, and I'm about to bring them, and I'm about to take care of what you got going on. I'm about to destroy them. And so Habakkuk's like, hold up, man, how you going to bring the unsaved to deal with the saved? How you going to bring the people that don't know you to deal with the people that know you? How you going to bring the criminal to deal with the situations that are going on in our house? How you going to bring the uncivilized to deal with the civilized? How you going to deal with the racist to deal with the Black Lives Matter? How you going to do that? And so what he tells me is, I'm going to take care of this matter. This situation that you think is gone untouched is not gone untouched. Here's God's real vision, though. God brings the unjust to deal with the social injustice among his people. He said, but watch this, because the question is, you would say, how could God bring evil? Because the scripture says in the New Testament, God does not tempt any man for evil. God is true. He's holy. He's separate. He's sacred, right? So how could God, this is Habakkuk's real question, because sometimes there's some things that are evil that happens in your life that you look like, man, how did God do this? The Israelites, remember, you brought us out here to kill us because there was no graves. Most of the time our lives, it's the thing that we don't like, the thing that we don't want to endure, that we don't want to face. And we look at God and say, man, why did you bring this ugly upon me? Why you bring this strife in my house? Why you bring this health issue? Why you bring these financial issues? Why did you bring COVID? And God, this is what God is telling you. He's telling them back, look, man, I'm not actually making them evil and conquer you. God says, I'm just not going to intervene to protect you.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm just not going to stop what I could normally stop.
Yeah.
See, he's telling them, I'm not bringing the criminal to break in your house. It's just that when you acting up in your house, when there's strife in your house, I just won't stop them from getting in your house.
Wow.
He said, I just won't do the things I used to do to keep you from what I've been keeping you from that you don't know I've been keeping you from. And that's really what he's telling Habakkuk, and that's really a paradigm shift because Habakkuk doesn't understand that. So look at this, you can see it. He brings to show you that he's doing this. In verse 3 and 9, in 3 he said, there's destruction and violence are before me. In verse 9, what does God say about the Babylonians or the Chaldeans? They all come for violence. Then you can see in verse 7, what does he says? Their justice and their dignity go forth from them. But in verse 14, it says that he said, you've ordained them for judgment. No, I'm sorry, in verse up ahead, in verse 4, look what it says. Justice never goes forth. This is Habakkuk's complaint. But then in verse 9, it says they all come for, no, I'm sorry. In verse 7, they all come for their justice and dignity come from them. So he's complaining to God saying, look, they are unjust. They're crooked in all their ways. But then God said, I'm about to bring somebody who is not just, but who has their own means of justice. That it comes from them, that they're subjective about the way they rule. They're biased. Their justice comes basically for what they can get. Not for what's right, but what's right for them. And so he's letting them know, what am I saying? He said that what you're seeing, Habakkuk, this vision I'm bringing you, he's teaching them a lesson that they're going to reap what they sow. They're reaping what they sow. He's trying to show Habakkuk about this sin. He said that you thought I would just come and tell them to stop. Anybody got kids where you've seen kids doing something where you had told them to stop jumping on the bed, and then all of a sudden, rather than this one time, you don't come in and tell them to stop. You let them keep jumping. You watch them get higher and higher, and then when they fall off and bump their head and come crying, you tell them, that's what you get. That's what you get. And they're like, what? I told you stop jumping on the bed beforehand. But a hard head makes a soft behind. See, I had to let you run to the brick wall for you to get it. Now, they were like, Mom, why didn't you tell me stop? Daddy, why didn't you tell me stop? Why you do this to me? No, I didn't do it to you. I just didn't prevent you from doing it to yourself.
Right.
See, sometimes what God does with sin is this is what he's telling them, that we got to be careful because you reap as you sow. Not necessarily what you sow. You reap the kind of sin you sow. Right? So he's letting him know that the reason that he has to get this revision, he said that this sin has been going on so long that they think there's no consequence to it because I haven't said no, because I haven't stepped in and said anything. When I was about to quit school in high school, I remember my grandmother, at the end of my junior year, I came home, had a job. I had lost every credit that year except one credit. Dry cleaning was the only credit. We've been talking about this. It's so funny. Dry cleaning was the only credit I got in both semesters, right? And so she said, I know what you about to do. I'm like, what? It's the last day of school. We done. I'm out. Friday. She said, well, I said, what do you mean? You about to quit school? But I gave her a report card with all flags, not patriotic. and so she said, she said, I know what you about to do. You ain't fooling me. I was like, what are you talking about? She said, I know you about to quit school. I'm like, what? She said, yeah, I know you about to quit school. I've been watching you all semester, getting up when you want to, going when you want to, dipping out and all that, and going to work. Because I was working 40 hours at Kroger's. And so what was happening was, he said, I didn't say nothing about it. I'm just going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you not to quit school, but I am telling you that as soon as you quit, you're getting up out of here. You getting up out of here. So I'm going to let you do what you want to do, but I want you to understand that the moment that you do what you want to do, you will not be sleeping in that basement down there. That room that is yours won't be yours no more. The food that you eating in here won't be yours no more. I'm not going to tell you not to, because I thought you was going to be better than everybody else, but you proved to be worse. So I'm going to let you do what you want to do. I stood there in tears, broken. But I can tell you that when she told me that, what she was going to let me do because she said she didn't care, the next year I got every credit and graduated because of that dry cleaning course. and so God has a way of saying, look, you keep doing what you're doing, I'm going to let you face what you got coming. I'm not going to bring it at you, I'm just not going to stop it. And so this is what he does. But also, I got to also tell you this too. It wasn't Habakkuk that was sinning, remember? Because he said it's the oracle that Habakkuk saw. See, you're saying that there's some people, some places, some things that God is letting you see, some situations that you're tired of watching, and you're watching them saying, why am I getting to visualize this? I'm not doing what they're doing. Why am I affected by this nonsense that they're carrying on? Because sometimes God wants to give you an object lesson to let you know you ain't as peachy cream as you think. See, look at what happened. He wasn't doing what they were doing, but what was his sin right here? He got to complain and got disappointed and disapproving of God. See, Galatians 6:1 says it this way, be careful when you see your brother caught in sin, that you give him the truth in love, lest you be caught up in sin yourself. Meaning that you could be telling somebody how to do right and how to change, but what will happen is while you changing, you get holier than now and walk yourself in the sin of arrogance, boasting like you've never done anything, like you've never been anything, like God has never pulled you out of something that you shouldn't have came out of, but you got yourself all the way into.
Wow. Yeah.
See, he's letting Habakkuk see this because he's letting them know that you got to be careful, because I know you think that you're holy and you're honoring me and you're doing the right thing and your situation isn't as bad as theirs is. I need to get you a vision right because you're not seeing it like I see it.
Right, yeah.
So he lets him see the burden.
Yeah.
To bring humility. And I got personal thing with that too. Another story was when I got saved, and the thing I got saved, I was drinking and smoking weed, as I told you, and fighting my wife, my girlfriend then, when Mackie was born. And what happened was on the day that happened, when the first time God never spoke to me, he said, you're going to be like your uncle. I'm like, what? My uncle was dying at the time, and he was dying because of heroin abuse. And good uncle loved him to death, and you couldn't see it like that. It was a year-long process. I had a front seat to it. I mean, for the time they said if he stopped, he'd be good, but the addiction was too much, kept going, and ended up dying. But praise the Lord, he got saved before he died. So the last month he was clean. But the situation, he got clean too late for him to experience the grace of God in propensity or in greatness here on earth. But he did get the glory. But what happened is God said, you're going to be just like him. I said, I'm not using heroin. God said, yeah, remember he didn't use heroin when you was a kid either. Remember, he was just drinking beer. He said, but remember, he stopped drinking beer. Then he started drinking Granddad Hunter. But then after he stopped drinking Granddad Hunter, he was smoking weed. Then he stopped smoking weed. Then he started using heroin. And the next thing you know, he said, what was he telling me? He said, it was a progression. He said, so right now, I know you think you're not that bad. He said, you drinking liquor and you smoking weed, but you on your way. And within 2 weeks, one of my cousins, while we was riding, would offer me to hit some cocaine while we was at the White Castle at Pendleton Pike in 34th Street. And I saw this, what God had already showed me. You on your way. And so God was telling me that you don't think you're on your way because you don't look that bad right now, but you need a revision. I got to add, move, remove, and substitute some things so you can see clearly, Gene, your depth perception is off. So my question to you is, what is it that you're looking at right now that objects are appearing closer than what they seem to you? There's sin crouching at the door, things that you don't think you're doing that is really closer to you than you think.
I know. Yeah.
God said you got to be careful.
Yeah.
You need binocular vision. You need him to bring in his spiritual to look into, so you take your physical so you can see what's really going on. And that's what happens. This is why, I just want to help you understand why the revision is needed. He's telling Habakkuk, don't get too holier than thou, thinking you better than anybody, because when you think you stand well, Paul said you fall. He said you got to be careful, you got to remain humble, realizing that you only hear by mercy and grace, not by anything that we've done. And so we can't take our financial situations, we can't take our academic situations, we can't take our clothes, our shoes, our mates, our houses, our cars, we can't take our jewelry, any of those things and act like we are the end all be all, that we are the best thing since sliced cheese. The devil is a lie. So he tells them that, and we remember last week, what was the first step to this revision? What happened? Well, what happened was, remember, Habakkuk told him that he was complaining, he was disapproving of God. And so what he said is, I'm going to take my stand at my watch post on the watchtower. Remember, the point that we use for that is that he presented himself to hear God's vision. Remember, Jesus said it this way, Matthew 6:33, he said, seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things, now some of these things, and all these things that you need will be added unto you. He said, seek the authority, the kingdom, because wherever there's a kingdom, there's got to be a king. He said, seek his authority, and said that not only his authority, seek the response, the righteousness that the king put forth. So go to God, say, God, I know you got all authority over this sin, this situation that I'm enduring, that I can't deal with on my own. I got myself into, but for somehow I can't get myself out. I need you to use your power to get me out. But in you using your power, you're going to dispense your power and expect me to work out your vision. I need you to tell me how to respond based on what you said to deal with what I'm facing, to deal with this health situation that I don't know how it's going to turn out. I need you to help me see what you want me to do. I need you to present yourself to hear the vision. That is the revision. That's how God adds, moves, removes, and substitutes some things to get us where we're supposed to be and to do what he wants us to do in any given situation at any given time.
Amen.
A revision. But after he says to present ourselves to hear the vision, our next point of emphasis we got to understand is this. So we got to remain responsible in what God has called us to be. Because remember that Habakkuk said that he wasn't going to leave his post. He said, even though I'm disappointed, even though I don't like what I'm seeing, it ain't already turned around yet. He said, I'm not going to leave my post. What is he saying? He said that don't let your disappointment produce disobedience. Don't let your disappointment produce disobedience. When God does some things that you don't expect him to do, don't let that disappointment and that disapproval of his actions produce disobedience to where you stop doing what you already knew he told you to do before the situation changed. Don't let your disappointment produce disobedience. It's okay to be disapproving of God and question what's going on because you're not God. I'm not God. He's going to do some things that we don't understand. But it's okay for us to go to him and ask questions, but don't be disobedient about that because that's disrespectful. So he says that. But then next, what we got to deal with today, and as we're doing that, we want to remember that what happens is in this revision is that we need God to give us his GPS system. We need his voice to give us guided sight. His voice, guided sight. Him speaking from on high to help us to do what's going on down low.
That's it.
Him speaking on high so we can deal with what's going on down low. And so that's what we need him to do. So after that, our next point that we deal with today is after we presented ourselves, we've been intentional to seek him, to seek his authority and to respond as he says to respond. The next thing that we need to do is we need to preserve his vision. You'll see it right there in verse 2. Look what it says. And the Lord answered me. He said, write the vision and make it plain on tablets so he may run who reads it. Write the vision, make it plain on tablets so he may run who reads it. So he says that I have to retain the vision. Hold on to what God has said. I got to keep the message. He says, write the vision, record it. Write what? What's the format of the vision? Well, visions are said to be different from dreams, as dreams will occur at nighttime while people are asleep. And they seem visual and things like that. And they're in a trance-like setting. Visions happen during the day where it's like a movie trailer. You see audio and visual. He's giving you a preview of attractions to come. He gives you a preview of coming attractions of what he's going to do. The exciting, better, hopeful things to get you out of the mess that you're in right now. How to move out of what you're stuck in. So he gives you a preview. to draw your attention, to seek him more, to trust him more, to know that the way it is, it ain't always going to be that way. And so it's a movie trailer. And so it happens in the daytime. So you imagine that he's sitting there looking at these Chaldeans, looking at this situation, this strife, and all of what he's dealing with, right? He's watching in his neighborhood going to kaputs and being destitute and almost desolate in regards to righteousness. He's looking at this mess, this destruction, this violence, this racism, this black on black crime. He's looking at the government going left and right at the same time. And God shows him a movie. So while he's looking out, he now sees the Chaldeans coming, and God says, this horde is coming. Makes me think of Gladiator. This horde is coming, and it's going to deal with these ruthless, reckless, ratchet people. And so after God tells him this, he tells him, and what he tells him, I need you to write this down. But why does he say write it down? Because when God gives us the word, what happens is when he's prophesied a promise, what generally happens is the only thing that makes us lose sight of what God has said, we start to forgetting is situations and circumstances. Yeah. When things change and get hard, the first thing that happens is we start to forget what God told us. Yeah. But so writing benefits the memory. It brings clarity of purpose. Right. So it has the idea, catch this right now, when you journal what God has told you in your quiet time, it has the ability of somehow taking you out of where you are to put you back where you were when you heard what you heard and saw what you saw. Yeah. What am I saying? Writing what God has said has a way of transporting you out of worry back into worship. Yep. It transports you out of the current worry back into the past worship so you can have future glory in your story. Right. You can see what God has said. You haven't written anything down, took notes in class, and when you're looking at your notes, all of a sudden you're right back to the moment that you were told these things. And what happens is you not only remember what you wrote down, but you start to remember the context for which it was told. Right. You start to get increased or added information. Right. God said, I need you to write this vision down, record it, so that you can understand what I'm telling you. Because situations and circumstances are not going to look that good. And he had to write it specifically because what God was telling him wasn't the peachy cream dream that we look for in a promise. He was telling him that there's going to be some people that's going to capture y'all for about 70 years. I know you weren't doing wrong, but you're going to experience some of the wrong that they got coming. I'm going to cover you in the midst of it, but I need you to remember this because as they're going through what they're going through, I'm going to keep you. He said, and they're going to wonder if this is really me. Because when the horde comes, they're going to start thinking that it's the devil. And so they're going to start talking to me about God. Why is the devil coming at me? But I need you to tell them, no, this is a consequence of the sin that you've been committing. And God has now stepped out of fellowship with you. You still his child. He just ain't acting on your behalf to protect you because he got to teach you that fat meat is greasy. He's going to need you to tell some people that while they're facing a hardship, that it's not the devil after you, it's God allowing his judgment so you come out of what you've been stuck in, so you can get back to him. I need you to write the vision. That means there's some things that you're watching people go through that you need to be a visionary and tell them that it could be God allowing this because he wants to get your attention to bring you closer to him. Now I got to tell you, that message is not a message that everybody wants to hear. When you start telling them that the hardship might be God trying to help them, they don't want to hear that. So don't expect a hug, a comfort, and a smile when you give them that message. That's a prophecy that they ain't going to ask you to come back to. They might tell you prophet lying. So he's just telling them, I need you to stay close to me. Write this down, Habakkuk. Because they not going to believe it's me doing it. But when they see it, he said, why write it down? Say, he who reads it may run with it. What is he saying? That when they see this vision, the details of what I'm telling you, they're going to be able to grab it and run with it. In the corporate world, they call this inspire and share vision. That means to get buy-in. That means that when you tell people what God has told you, or they get to read the word, they get to see that their hopes and their dreams are tied into what God is going to do. It ain't always the negative. God said, even in the promise, the things that you said God is going to do, you want them to be able to read it and see it clearly so they can see God for themselves. So they can start to see that I see God turning your life around. And if God turns your life around, I know he'll surely do it for me. Right. So this is why we want to get close to God and do what Habakkuk did. We want to present ourselves to hear the vision, but we also want to make sure we keep the vision. But we don't want to get all holier now, because look what he said right there. He said, make it plain on tablets. What is he saying? He said that when you're talking to him, He said, talk to them where they are.
Right.
Don't talk to them from a high-minded position like you holier than thou. Don't give them all the Christianese and all that nonsense. He said, I ain't nonsense, but in the sense of you trying to help them out. You don't got to, if you're going to talk about their sin, don't forget you got sin.
Right.
Yeah. If you're going to tell them how they need to come up, tell them how you came up or how God is trying to bring you up.
Right.
Because you want to let them know that you're not leading the journey, you want to journey with them. And see, he said, make it plain. He said, stop scribbling. Make it simple and plain. You're not 3 years old. He said, when you talk to them, make sure they can use it. They can understand it.
Yeah.
Give them smart goals. Make it specific. Make it measurable and attainable, relevant, and so they can have a timetable to know when they can see it come to pass. How they can use what you're talking about.
Right.
He said, write the vision.
Right. That's good.
If you write it, there'll be clarity in what you tell them.
Yep.
And they'll be able to use it. If you make it plain, they'll be able to see that this is something from God, not something from self.
Right.
They'll be able to see themselves in it. If you share your story, if you tell them how you were this or you were that, you was drinking and smoking weed, and how while you were on your way to a party, thinking about committing suicide, and God came in and spoke to you after you had just beat up your girlfriend while she was holding your baby at the same time, and then God somehow, hours later, would come and talk to you and tell you that he has a plan for your life.
That's good.
And you ain't got a job on top of it, been getting high all day, that's why the fight happened. And God comes and says, I got a plan for you. A plan for you to prosper, to give you a future and a hope.
Yeah.
A plan not for harm.
Yeah.
But yet you're a mess, tore up from the floor up. But God said, I'm about to use you.
Yeah.
See, God said, I need you to write that vision because God has told us some things. There's some things that God has told us that he's going to do. And because we haven't been what we're called to be or what we're supposed to be, we don't take it seriously. We sit sometimes in church and we hear the word and God said, I'm about to make you magnificent. You're going to bring people to me. But because nobody ever listened to us, we don't think that God is talking to us, and then therefore we don't think people listen to us off of what God just said.
Right.
So I need you to record the vision. You got to write it down. You got to make it palatable. Make it so they can understand it, so they can grab a hold of what you're saying. And then lastly, he says this, and then as you write the vision down, at this point what you got to do is you got to patiently expect the vision. You got to be hopeful about what God has told you. Because for still, in verse 3, for still the vision awaits an appointed time. It hastens to the end, it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Let me just walk it out like this. If you were patiently awaiting the vision, it just means being hopeful. The idea is that you're expecting God to do what he said, right? The word for appointed time means a fixed time, means the coming together of things. So if you look around right now, you know how the season's changing. You know how as it's starting to get cold, you see less flies. You know, the bees wasn't around, but yesterday it was warm and the bees somehow show back up. But when you look at the season, but when you look at the season, certain things start to happen and you start to realize, man, it's about to be fall. The pools start closing. I walked downstairs and all the people that normally on Saturday at the pool wasn't there, outside. You know, and there was some people that could handle cold weather, so they wasn't there this time, no. And normally decked out by 11 o'clock. Nobody there. And so then I go into the little break room area, whatever, lobby area, nobody there, normally packed. Walk back outside, start looking around, seeing the leaves kind of flying around and the colors starting to change and realize, yep, it's fall.
Yep.
We get these sweaters out. God is saying there's some things right now that's happening in your life. Not just one thing, but it's a group of things that's happening and coming together to create one purpose of what he's doing. And if we won't present ourselves to God, we won't hear the vision. And if we don't write it, we're likely to forget it. We'll feel in church like, man, that's good what God said. We don't take notes in church, so then Monday comes, we lose what Sunday said. And so we don't have anything to look back at. One of the reasons I record the sermons is for you to go back at the sermon, look at it, for God to speak to you, maybe more so on that day when you look at it the second time or hear the second time than you did the first time. Most of the stuff that I preach, I got to go over throughout the whole week over and over again. And if you'll notice that the sermon I'm speaking to you right now is not memorized, I've actually recorded. I wrote it. So that I can give you the vision that he gave me by myself, so I can give it out. So that right now, I'm doing what he told Habakkuk. I wrote it down, now I'm giving it to you so you might run with it. And I'm trying to make it simple and plain. Amen? And so that's what he said. Write it and then have an expectation for it. It will not lie, meaning that God is not man that he will lie. He's going to do what he said he'll do. Amen?
Amen.
We got to keep the vision. Let's